Hi everybody, it's Kim Winter from Logistics Executive Group again. Thanks for joining us. Bit of a unique show today. We've got a special guest with us. We're here in Nairobi in Kenya, East Africa. Been here for a week, filming, meeting business leaders, women in leadership, and also doing some work on the not-for-profit side as well. I'm joined today by my business colleague. First started working with my colleague here in 1989, and we've been co-partners here and directors of Logistics Executive since the early 2000s. So without further ado, our head of mergers and acquisitions, our managing director for corporate advisory and for our consulting business, Darryl Judd.
Thanks, Kim, and what a great place to film the special edition. I mean, Africa is just an emerging market of future leaders, and of course we've experienced that all week. And to be somewhere where we can hear the sounds of the hustle and bustle of a big city like Nairobi, it's fantastic. Yeah,
good stuff. So we want to get a couple of grabs from you today about a few of the things that we've been doing here. First of all, I want to talk about supply chain. We've got a whole range of clients who've been doing work here for over a decade, and been meeting with a number of customers here and working in some core industry parts of the supply chain here today. So tell us what's going on, what's exciting. I mean, there's a massive shift going on here in East Africa at the moment. The time feels different from the last 20 years that you and I have been coming in and out of East Africa and Kenya in particular. What's going on in supply chain?
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Every time you come down to Africa, there's always something new that's sort of thriving and bubbling. And sometimes I guess when we don't live so close to this market, we lose sight of that, and particularly in the last 18 months with all the headlines of the pandemic, the supply chain congestion that we have, digitization. Sometimes Africa gets left off the map. But the things that have struck me this week that have been really interesting is now we're seeing Africa. I mean, it's always been an agriculture hub, and we know the success stories of companies like Orison Flowers and VP Group, who have been supplying both the flower markets for Europe for many years, but also the packed vegetable, the grow to pack services. We've known those stories. They've been around for a while, but we're now seeing these massive food corridors open up here, and we're seeing a massive amount of outgrowers who are now integrating into global supply chains rather than selling their produce into local markets. Propagation, seeding, advances in agri-tech here over the last 2 years have just really thrived, and you only have to spend a few hours at Nairobi airport as we did earlier in the week with some of the major exporters and just see the volume of cargo that's coming out on those aircraft to see that Africa really is the future food base in the world.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been out the airport a lot, and just because a lot of cargo companies out there, and one of the real big narratives here at the moment is networking, the network of both sea and air alone, road. There's a lot of combinations coming together and a lot of integration happening in the supply chain that we've never seen before.
Yeah, I think driven by large infrastructure investments. I mean, here in Kenya we saw obviously the SGR rail network open up for passengers, but that allowed a leapfrog into containers by rail, bringing Mombasa port closer to the junction of Nairobi. We've seen massive investments in highways and roads, and so connecting the hinterland and the landlocked countries. And of course, Nairobi Airport speaks for itself. It's one of the largest outbound export markets, particularly for food and vegetables in the whole of Africa. Yeah. And you stand there in a day, and the amount of freighters that are coming in and out and uplifting those high value commodities into markets and demand. But I think it's the infrastructure investment. Not to forget the leadership. I think one of the other factors that we've seen at play this week is just what a bustling hub of entrepreneurialism this place is, and a lot of fintech startups. I met a lady this morning who I spent time with, and their company specializes in fintech financing, and particularly for the supply chain, and so they fund a lot of that activity between the bridge between the customer and the forwarder, and that's now a digital transaction. So businesses become a lot more economical because of advances in those areas. So I think it's an exciting time to do business here and to be here and just to see the dynamic change that's taking place.
There's a fair few non-disclosure agreements floating around, but and there's probably limited what you can talk about, but there's a lot going on in the mergers and acquisition space here as well, as we've never seen before. Was that a COVID thing? Was that happening before then?
Yeah, look, I think it's accelerated that. I mean, we've seen the global consolidation take place recently amongst the big boys, but we've also seen smaller transactions, Asia, Europe, the US, of course. The Maersk acquisition just recently of Visible Supply Chain in the US was a big one, B2C Europe. And I think there's an element of that driving it, but I also think there is a push now into Africa. Africa is very rich in minerals. It's got a huge agricultural basin, and as we turn attention to things like food security and developing our emerging markets, the interplay between land-based assets and needing a physical presence here in Africa, as opposed to relying on agents to be able to build out your infrastructure and connect those networks, is becoming increasingly important. And as you know from the discussions we've had this week, Kenya, Tanzania, parts of West Africa, very attractive markets now for global companies who are in logistics, looking to access those channels, looking to build those corridors. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of the result of that. And there's some very fine companies down there that have been very well run for a long time. And so as we push into emerging markets, they become increasingly more attractive.
I think one of the most impressive and humbling things I've seen over the last week was to meet yesterday with the owners and founders of an organisation that started in the 70s with 5 people, now has over 12,000 staff, run their own schools, their own power generation, they feed everybody, they have their own bus company, and they're exporting over 1 million flowers a day. Roses a day.
I mean, it's hard to contextualise just what 1 million roses a day looks like on top of the 70 or 80,000 kilos of shelf-ready vegetables that's going into high-value markets in Europe. I mean, it's hard to see that in mind and just see the scale of it. But the thing that struck me yesterday with that organisation was when the founder talked about, the very first thing he talked about was the fact that 12,000 employees, they're the biggest private employer here in Kenya. They didn't lay off a single person during COVID. They didn't hold money back from their suppliers. They continued to feed that ecosystem. And my numbers might be wrong there, but I think he talked about an ecosystem of feeding 75,000 people in secondary suppliers in their ecosystem. And I thought that was an absolute testimony to not reacting short term, looking at it long term. Taking that stance that we're going to protect the values of the company and the things that have got us to this point, and that's clearly people in leadership and entrepreneurialism, and as they've empowered their people over the years to make decisions, and so supporting them through COVID. Now, as they've seen those markets bounce back and growth return, there's so much more loyalty there in the organisation. I thought that was a wonderful story and a lesson for all of us.
We were very fortunate to meet, and again after so many years, and we met them many years ago, of course. You talk about leadership, and it segues into just a snapshot of what they did around COVID. They actually took such a serious approach that over 12,000 staff, there was a handful of people that got COVID only. So it was 0.0001 of whatever percent.
Wasn't that just an amazing story? They took action immediately. They invested in the technology at the farm level that ensured that their workplace was safe. They maintained those policies. Their staff embraced that. And you're right, a handful of cases on 12,000 people. It meant very little disruption to their business.
Well, I've got you. Let's just flip this. I mean, we're doing quite a bit of work down here on leadership. We're interviewing over a dozen leaders, female leaders in leadership down here, women in leadership in Kenya and from around different parts of Africa. In fact, we've got a few this afternoon that we're interviewing, and funnily enough, we've just stumbled into people without too much planning here, by the way, including you over breakfast, us with our driver. Let's just talk about our driver.
What I find really fascinating,
Uber.
what I find really fascinating in places like this is that entrepreneurial spirit. It doesn't matter how difficult my upbringing's been, or what my education's been, or my circumstances. I thrive for success, and I give things a go, and I put every energy into that. And I think that's why, as we've seen, incubation hubs come to Kenya. We've seen the rise of digital technology here. We're a massive centre here for digital creation, particularly in fintech, as we said earlier. That actually we've now seen those future leaders, those young professionals rise. And you don't have to be in too many places to look at a board on a conference, and as we did yesterday in the hotel. And if you look at the 5 or 6 events in the hotel, the vast majority are focused on leadership, development, mentoring, skills, entrepreneurship. And I think that's fostering a new culture, a culture that's going to lead this place to a lot of success. And when we link it and orchestrate it to the rest of the world, there's no doubt in my mind that those entrepreneurs will go on to many, many greater things. And there's great examples of it. Juma out of Nigeria, the e-commerce company, the first $10 billion unicorn out of here, and there's many others like that.
Sure. I think the thing that struck me is that the youth here, I mean, there's probably 50% unemployment. You're in a country of 52 million people. There's probably 10 million people just here in Nairobi. There's a shed load of unemployment. There's a lot of poverty here. But I'll tell you what, anybody who's been to Kenya, you'll never find a country with such good spirit, with motivation, with hope, and people who educate themselves. I mean, anybody who's met a Kenyan anywhere else in the world, and there's a big diaspora all around the world, including Australia and New Zealand. Kenyans love education, so it's,
they do, and I think they thrive for that knowledge. They thrive for engagement. If you look at this week, how many people have approached us in foyers of hotels or in the taxis? You mentioned our Uber driver who drives an Uber part-time but runs a very successful career out the side. That resilience, that drive to succeed is a characteristic that I think you find not just in Kenya but in many places in Africa. And now that we're opening up that education boom and we're giving them the opportunity to thrive, we're seeing the benefits of that. And you only have to look at the GDP growth of the top 3 countries in Africa, including Kenya, to see the empowerment that's had over the last 3 or 4 years. And as you said at the very start, it's been, I think, a couple of years since you've been down here. I'm obviously down here more regularly, but you look at the development and just the sense and the feel and the spirit and all of that in a backdrop of COVID. And that's a really hard one. So I think the resilience comes into it. And I think that'll be a characteristic that'll lead them to success.
Well, I don't know whether I've told you, but we're interviewing Maureen, our driver, tomorrow, and we're going to hear her story because she's an incredibly impressive person. Mum, 2 kids, single mum. She's an electrical engineer. She's got a full-time job, but she doubles up on Uber, and she's also now an ambassador on ground here for our charity, Oasis Africa, Freedom from Poverty. We started that 16 years ago. We've educated over 8,000 kids, and we're actually filming tomorrow in the slum with somebody we met yesterday. Tell us a little bit about the guy we met yesterday.
I mean, look, what a fascinating guy. I mean, Ahmed is a very successful businessman. He built a Pan-Africa business in the medical space. He recently decided to step back as the CEO and founder of that, primarily to enjoy the time he had with his elder children as they moved off out of home and into marriage, and he didn't want to miss that opportunity. But the thing I find that's interesting about it, he built it using children and adults who were educated in the slums, perhaps didn't have the life that we all have of privilege and access to education, and he took them, mentored, to guide them, and he's now built a successful company over 12 years. He's been able to see the benefit of that, and actually his leadership team have all come on that journey, and so he's able to hand the baby of his corporate company into the hands of people who wouldn't normally get that opportunity, and they will be so empowered now to take that to the next level. And you can see that yesterday in his excitement and the social things that he's doing. And so tomorrow's going to be an interesting day when we do get into Kibera and look at how we're impacting lives through those types of programs that he's running. So look, all in all, I think it's been a great week in Kenya. It's a great touch base and see what's going on. And all I can say is watch out. There's going to be a lot of headlines come out of here, and as you know from our own business, the activity that we're doing here and some of the orchestration that's going on, we really are pushing the envelope now. So it's fantastic.
No, Ahmed was a very, very special man, very humbled to meet with him yesterday, and In fact, he's invited us back next month and to join one of his leadership courses and try and tell people a little bit about what we've learned along the way and all the mistakes we've made and help people out to maybe find their pathway forward. So.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Kenya, right? I mean, all of a sudden now you've got this open invitation to come back and transfer that knowledge and impart that knowledge and share the lessons that we've learned in business and others. But also to contribute, obviously through Hands Up Kenya, through OASIS Africa, but also through his initiatives as well. And I think that's the sort of spirit that really is driving success in this marketplace.
Yep. Well, good to catch up. I think this is the first interview I've ever done with you that I can recall.
But it's nice to be it's nice to be travelling again and on the road again, and somewhere that we can step outside and feel a sense of excitement and not talk about the pandemic for once and all the things we've been through. I mean, this really is we're now coming into a new chapter that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's been a long road since 1989. So, good on you, mate.
Thank you very much, and
thanks for the time.
Pleasure to catch up.
Yeah, we're off for a PCR test now. So
PCR test, another swab.
Okay.
Thanks,
Darryl.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers, man.